Uh-oh. Well, we're getting toward the end of the day now, and it's time to wake up. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is here for our closing keynote. For those of us who've been in the climate fight for a while, Senator Whitehouse has been a North Star for our work. He is himself an amazing and powerful source of renewable energy. His 279 weekly Time to Wake Up speeches to the Senate over the past 12 years are an encyclopedia on climate change. It's a masterclass on what we need to do to solve it and what's in the way. All the corporations, all the dark money, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they've all done their best to ignore or discredit the senator. He's never stood down nor slowed down in his relentless work to save us from what he and we all know. Climate change is the biggest crisis, the biggest challenge, and the biggest opportunity that America and humanity will ever face. And of course, he's done much more than speeches, defending the science and the scientists and supporting the work of so many people and organizations working for climate solutions. This is his fourth appearance at the American Climate Leadership Summit. 3 months ago today, Senator Whitehouse made his last Time to Wake Up speech on the Senate floor, the end of one epoch and the beginning of another. So Senator Whitehouse, welcome as we hopefully move out of the darkness and into the dawn. Thank you so much. We've been doing this for 10 years, and I can tell you it's the most intense one ever, and we will all continue to follow your lead as we get to work fixing this tremendous problem we've created. And I look forward to your comments.
Well, thank you, Bob, and thank you to all the Eco America folks who are joining us. I really appreciate the work of this organization to help all of our different elements in the environmental movement work together consistently. It's an exciting day. We just passed the Congressional Review Act to undo the Trump methane rules. And as you all know, the oil and gas industry was just particularly venomously bad about the methane leakage rules during the Trump administration. They'd more or less agreed that this was the right thing to do under the Obama administration. And when Trump came in, they just put on a whole new mask and pushed EPA to do really appalling things like pull down requirements for reporting of methane leakage, pull down requirements for building equipment that would minimize methane leakage. They were just really appalling. So this was a good turnabout, and a new EPA, a Biden EPA, is going to be able to regulate in that space. So that's exciting. And I open with that because it happened today, and because I think it's also symbolic of the larger situation that we are in which things that weren't possible very recently are suddenly possible under President Biden. He's 3 for 3 on personnel, on policy, and on passion about climate change. And we now have the task of taking that impetus that the Biden administration is showing and making it work through the House, over to the Senate, and back to legislation that the president can sign that will get us to 1.5 degrees. We've done really good work pulling together groups that were at odds or going in different directions. And I think you're going to see legislation come up that has very strong provisions for workers in this space. We've called them energy veterans. They won the global war for economic dominance. Nobody told them that they were polluting the atmosphere at the time. That wasn't their fault. They took hard and dangerous jobs to give America this enormous victory. And we should treat them with the respect that all of the comfort and all of the economic success and prosperity that they created entitles them to. And that now is coming into our conversation in a very, very positive way. And President Biden's relations with the labor movement is particularly strong in making sure that that happens, and that they will have the trust when he gives his word that they're going to be taken care of, that they're not going to be cut out at the last minute in some kind of a wheeler deal. The other group that, as Bob and Eco America knows, has been cut out of our economic and environmental conversation for a long time has been the environmental justice community. And it is really great now to hear in virtually every presentation out of the Biden administration on climate change, the important role of putting economic justice front and center and making sure that our goals of solving the climate crisis and bringing better economic justice to America and making sure that the environmental costs aren't borne by people who don't have the political capability to fight back, that all gets resolved together. But the key thing is that as we bring all these constituencies together, we can't allow satisfying the constituencies to be enough. The only thing that's enough is a carbon pricing strategy, a carbon emissions strategy that will target us to 1.5 degrees. Mother Nature is a very stern taskmaster on this stuff. And the laws of physics and biology and chemistry don't brook much in the way of exceptions. So we've got to keep our coalition together, and we've got to keep our coalition on target to hit 1.5 degrees. And I think we're in a position to do that. And so, there's really never been quite a moment like this before, where a clear pathway to a demonstrably significant, safe pathway for our planet is before us to do. And I would add that we can make that pathway a little broader and a little easier to walk if we can accomplish two goals and recognize two facts. The first is that despite what a lot of the big oil majors are saying about their respect for climate change and climate science and their desire to support certain climate measures, the fact of the matter is that over a long period of time, they built an enormous apparatus of lies, of attacks on real climate science, of political manipulation, and of an enormous amount of dark money political spending. And that apparatus, which is much studied by scientists, described as having, as many as 60 plus different organizations in it, that apparatus is still up and going. The oil majors may say one thing, but the apparatus that they created and funded to oppose climate action still walks on. And whether they're quietly supporting it and quietly telling it, you keep doing this while we tell the public something else, or whether it's just a zombie apparatus continuing to fight after its leadership has abandoned it, it doesn't really matter. It still is fighting. It still is a really tough opponent, and it is still holding back the Republican caucus from doing obvious things. Today was an example. Many oil majors supported the CRA. 3 Republicans would cross the zombie apparatus. Everybody else tied tight to the old view. So we've got to continue to out the denial apparatus funded by dark money that the fossil fuel industry has maintained, because it is going to be an adversary. And if you're not tangling with your adversaries, watch out for how you turn out in the fight. The second is our friends in corporate America. And I've spent a lot of time talking with CEOs about this issue, and we've all seen very strong statements out of the Climate Leadership Council, out of the Business Roundtable, out of individual corporate leaders, significant commitments to sustainability, significant commitments to their supply chains even. But there's one big exception, and that is their lobbying, their political work, the lobbying and electioneering work that corporate America does. That's where, the phrase where the rubber hits the road. Well, where corporate America hits Congress is through this apparatus, through their lobbying and electioneering effort. And I will tell you right now that lobbying and electioneering effort by corporate America is pretty close still to zero. Their trade associations are moving in the right direction, but still negative. Some of them are vehemently still negative. Many of them don't bother, and that sends a really deafening silent signal of its own. Our Silicon Valley companies make some of the strongest commitments about their own plans and their own desires to be carbon neutral and to support a good climate solution and good climate policy. But when they come to Washington, their advisory group, the TechNet it's called, that does their trade group lobbying, last year didn't even put climate on their list, didn't even put renewable energy on their list. This year, they made glancing mention of climate and renewable energy as they focused on the real things that mattered to their bottom line right now. So when you see companies that have that kind of clout and the most forward-leaning political positions on climate publicly, then come to Congress and abandon ship and punt all their climate effort and just no interest, that's a really important signal. And I'm kind of the whistleblower on this because this is my ecosystem, and I know who's here for serious. We all know who's here for serious and who isn't. And I'm out to just make sure people know, because we can make our pathway to a stronger climate bill much easier if we continue to go after the dark money apparatus that the fossil fuel industry has stood up to oppose us. And if we continue to urge our corporate friends to take this seriously, not just in their corporate precinct, not just in their supply chain, not just in their press releases, but in what they're doing in Congress and what they're saying in Congress. And they just aren't there yet. I can hear them, in the locker room getting suited up. A couple of them have kind of wandered out onto the field a little bit, but they're not on the field to play yet. They're not there yet. And time is wasting. We need them on the field now. So that's my real message. We have this great, great opportunity, but in order to really seize it, it's not enough to get the policy right. We've got to make sure we get the politics right so that we win this battle at the end of the day. And that end of the day is, I hope, this year, for sure, this Congress. And with that, I'll end my comments, and happy to take any comments or questions that anybody may have in the intervening time.
Senator Whitehouse, thank you so much. Just a little side point. I don't know if you know Bill Weil, the former Chief Sustainability Officer and his Climate Voice effort. I think it's a fantastic.
They're very aligned. They're trying to use the workers in companies to call out the absence of those companies on climate lobbying and climate political effort. And it's really a powerful thing. And Bill's it's a really useful piece of work that he's doing. It's strategic.
Yeah. The Biden administration has worked with a speed and scale that I don't think any of us suspected. And it is very heartening. It is very encouraging. It is really, in spite of the tenfold decline in renewable energy costs over the past decade, electric cars, batteries, all the great developments, I still didn't think we were going to be able to push it over the line. But Biden Harris and the whole team there is doing unbelievable amount of talent, unbelievable amount of integrity, and it feels good right now. But still, 52% by 2030 isn't enough, right? And 100% by 2050 isn't enough.
No.
Huge wave of stuff coming out with the omnibus spending bill, with the Jobs Act, with the new budget stuff, and all the discretionary or I forget the term, but that's $5.7 trillion between those three bills, and so there's so much momentum, but there's going to be a second wave. I think, are we going to get the first wave of this done, and then what's the second wave going to look like?
I think the second wave gets defined by Glasgow. I think it's the intention of John Kerry and Joe Biden and of a lot of our colleagues and of the hosts, including the conservative government in Great Britain, to see that Glasgow is more powerful than Paris, that the Glasgow Agreement is more significant and makes a bigger dent than Paris did. And I think the international agreements that are strengthening and strengthening and strengthening as we head to November in Glasgow are going to be the thing against which we measure what we've done in infrastructure and in investment. What else do we need to do to make good on the Glasgow promises? And I think that's the other really important standard that we're going to have to meet. Mother Nature is looking very carefully at us. She wants us to do our job in the Congress to get the right bill passed, but we need to have the global plan as well. And to the extent the global plan diverges from what we've done in Congress, we need to fill that in after that global plan is settled.
Spectacular. I can't wait for Glasgow.
We're going.
We've always done what we can do instead of what we need to do, right? And I think what you're saying and what you've always been saying, we got to do what we need to do. Are we going to do what we need to do this time around?
That's the acid test. I think a lot of people are really committed to that. I think it's going to be really important that we avoid, as Democrats, many of us in this area are Democrats, our penchant for what President Obama called circular firing squads, in which we quarrel with each other about what we should be doing rather than getting it all done. And I think this is one of those cases in which whatever tool you want to bring to the table, whatever strategy you have or support for solving the climate crisis before it collapses around us, we need to do it all. And the answer to everybody should be yes, how can we work together and get that done too? Rather than people pointing fingers at each other and saying, no, I don't want it that way, I want it this way, I want it my way, I don't want it your way. We're past all that. We really have, as I said, there's only one standard, that's Mother Nature's. She does not kid around. And you heard Pope Francis, he said, God always forgives. That's why God is God. People, they sometimes forgive, but sometimes they don't. Mother Nature, he said, she never forgives. You slap her, she will slap you back. And that's the standard we have to meet. Mother Nature will slap us back if we don't get this right.
Is there, we've got hundreds of people here. Many of them are CEOs, directors. Most of them are not environmentalists, and they're not, I call them climate civilians. And, what advice would you give us and everyone to be as supportive as we can? Is there anything that we should do different now than we would have done 6 months or a year ago?
I would ask every CEO to do an audit, an immediate one, an independent one, if you feel like it, of your corporate political stance on climate. And I think if you do an audit of all the groups you support and what their position is, and where your lobbying effort has been deployed in the last few years, virtually every corporation will find out that their lobbying and electioneering, their political effort, has been at complete odds with their stated policy. And that's an embarrassing place for a corporation to be. I think many of the CEOs aren't aware of how opposed much corporate lobbying is to corporate goals in climate. And a good, hard, solid reckoning about that, I think, would really focus people's attention and make sure that the adjustment politically is made so that everybody in Congress is hearing a single strong message from corporate America, which is get this done.
Absolutely. And we have another question coming in from one of our attendees that is along the same lines. How do we, as consumers, get corporate America to go to Congress to do that kind of lobbying? What's your recommendation for folks who are not CEOs, but
I think that's a great point. Not to pick on them particularly, but I do all the time. Coke and Pepsi, they're two of our best companies on climate. If you look at their websites and if you look at their policies and if you look what they're trying to do through their supply chains, but the American Beverage Association doesn't lift a finger on climate. That's their trade association. That's where the rubber of the drinks beverages industry meets the road of Congress. It's not an issue for them. They don't lift a finger. And they both support the Chamber of Commerce, which has been our worst adversary on all of this for a long time. Now, the Chamber has gone from being worst adversary up to, most improved, but still not over and certainly not, strong for us yet. So they would do well to do exactly the kind of political self-audit that I've talked about. But in the meantime, there's no reason their customers can't write letters and post things, and they really pay attention. Consumer products companies really pay attention, and they particularly pay attention to what young consumers have to say. So if you write to Coke or Pepsi and say, hey, I'm a young consumer of your product, and I heard from Senator Whitehouse that your trade association isn't lifting a finger on climate, please tell me what's up with that and why I should continue to buy your products when I care so much about climate. That'll hit a nerve.
And we make these climate action sheets just two sides. One side, what you need to know, the other side, what you need to do. We'll make one about it, and I can show you one of them.
Nice, Megan.
No more 40-page, guides. It's, this is it, do it. And But one of the other things that is local versus national, or state versus national. The environmental movement, when we are out of power in the executive branch, marches out to states and whatever and tries to get stuff done. And now we're all flowing back to the federal level and doing everything we can there. How important are local communities, and what can we do with them?
Makes a huge difference. I mean, the flames of climate action were really kept alive at the state and local level during the Trump administration. And to the point where Jay Inslee at last got cap and trade passed in his state. Everybody, all the solemn voices in Washington, oh, cap and trade, that's dead. Nobody could possibly do cap and trade now. Well, he just did. And our New England states all just went to take RGGI, which was our greenhouse gas emissions common pledge, and extended it to transportation. That had never been done before. That's a huge step forward. And those are all things that signal the interest of governors and that signal the interest of mayors. And interestingly, once you get away from Congress, where the fossil fuel industry has deployed so much of its malicious effort, you get Republicans. You get Republican governors and you get Republican mayors who see this as a practical problem and are trying to fight for practical solutions. So in Maryland and in Massachusetts, you have Republican governors who are not in the climate denial camp that has occupied so much of the Republican Party in Congress. So it's been a really good, place where hope was kept alive during the bleak Trump years, but also a really good signal that this is by its nature bipartisan when the fossil fuel industry isn't putting its heel down on the National Republican Party.
Let me do one more question, and I'll let you do any closing comments you might want. We heard today from Tommy Wells, who's the Director of Energy for the City of Washington, D.C. He's been a great advocate, super smart, been in so many different roles. And he brought up price on carbon, and he said, no, you got to pass laws that they can do it. A price on carbon isn't going to get you there. How helpful is putting a price on carbon?
If you look at MIT's studies, if you look at Rhodium studies, one of the groups that does a lot of the analysis, if you look at Resources for the Future, if you look at pretty much every analysis of what the most effective intervention is, the most effective intervention is a price on carbon. And the reason it's the most effective intervention is because the International Monetary Fund has calculated that the subsidy for fossil fuel in the United States every year is $600 billion. And that is mostly avoiding the negative externalities of all their pollution. It's being able to pollute for free. So IMF puts the pollute for free subsidy that they get at about $600 billion. That's a huge advantage for one fuel against others. And if you're going to try to grow a really robust renewable and clean energy portfolio while leaving it under the heel of a opposing technology's $600 billion subsidy, you're setting yourself up for a real battle. Now, the problem with carbon pricing has been that it got tangled up with a whole bunch of regulatory repeals in the way that it was originally launched. And so people who lived near a power plant and had to deal with the coal ash and had to deal with the mercury and had to deal with the toxic particulates, to tell them, okay, we're going to go to a carbon price and somebody somewhere else is going to take the carbon out of the air, and the regulations that protect you from the mercury and the coal ash and the particulate matter are all going to be weakened. I'd be mad as hell about that too. And that's why this convergence between the environmental justice community and the environmental community has been so strong. I think, again, we can't be a circular firing squad that shoots at different things, different strategies that we know will help the problem. Every strategy that we know will help the problem, we've got to throw at the problem until we know we're safe. And then we can start dialing them back out, depending on which was less effective or less popular. But at the moment, we're in in a, the fire alarm is ringing, and we got to throw everything we can at this problem until we know we've got it covered.
Well, Senator, you do so much on climate change. I can't believe that you have time to do anything else, but I see you popping up, the oceans, everything all over the place, and it's just astonishing. So I want to thank you for that on behalf of all of us. And, just whatever kind of support we can give to you, please don't hesitate to ask. And if you have any closing comments, go for it. Otherwise,
no, I think I made them in response to that last question. This is our moment. We can win the trifecta of a really good climate bill that actually takes us out of danger, that also at the same time increases our economic progressivity and economic fairness, and that also provides the relief that polluted communities have longed for so long. We need to do all of it. We can do all of it. This is our moment. Let's make it happen.
Megan, you're muted.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Senator Whitehouse, for joining us.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Eco America. Thank you, Bob and Megan.
Thank you. Well, he never disappoints, right, Bob?
Like, he's just astonishing. I don't know what percentage of the credit we get for keeping the lights alive on climate action and moving it forward. But I think in the Senate and in the federal government, he's been certainly in the top small, tiny handful at the very top of keeping us moving on climate change. And like he says, this is our moment, and I totally feel that.
Yeah, we were talking about tenacity in the last session, and he really embodies it. I mean, how many wake up speeches did he make on the Senate floor? I mean, it was hundreds.
No, it was like 279, 12 years, 50 weeks a year, 25 weeks a year, something like that. And yeah, but it was so cool. I went back before I interviewed him and watched a few of those, including his very first one and his very last one. And it's fun to watch the sophistication. He's really a master class on climate change. Somebody should just go back there and catalog them and group them so that we can all. There's so many. You got to find the ones that are relevant to what we're doing today. But
well, yeah, and of course, on his last one, he dropped the mic, and I really hope that a couple of years from now, we'll all be able to do that. We'll all be able to drop the mic, because progress is happening the way we need to be, which is getting to 100%. Not by 2050, but hopefully a lot sooner than that.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody drop a lapel mic before, but he did good with that. It wasn't quite the boom, but it was a little thing, and it was quite the day, Megan. I don't know how you kept up with the whole thing, moderating a session, keeping us all online and track. Of course, Ashley's hiding on us and keeping us all in line. But thanks for all that. It was. The session on justice was unbelievable. I could feel my heart pounding, and then just all the sessions today. The speakers were just so informative and so helpful. It was. I can't wait till we catalog these things and get them up on the website. I think Monday or Tuesday next week.
Absolutely. As I said earlier, I think I'm going to be binge watching them like I do Netflix. I have so many notes. I tried to take notes, and I've literally run out of paper, because so many amazing things were said, so many calls to action, really a lot of great guidance for us all, and I've seen social media on fire with a lot of the quotes. Some of the highlights are really just call to action to listen, really looking at local power.
I will never forget a bunch of lines that were said today, like when Jackie DuPont Walker said, she walks in the room and there's not many, and she does the nod. You talk about people being othered and them recognizing it and what they're doing about it, and then you just hear her passion and commitment, and so many of these other people, in spite of stuff that might have put me down, these people are charging ahead, showing us the way, we've been the ones that have been behind. So, but that's really, really good stuff.
Well, it's about building the trust with each other. And Hari Hans was talking about authentic, close relationships, and Katie about transformational relationships. I mean, there's definitely been a thread throughout all these discussions, which is really coming to the table with passion, with a vision, but also the humility to listen and the willingness to really connect and collaborate with people that you might not have met before or have collaborated with before, who may you have had differences with in the past.
Like you said, the word listen and the word trust, those are two words that I underlined 4 or 5 times from that session. And it's something that, we all need to learn and do more, because when you let people locally come up with their own solutions and you listen to them and do that, like Reverend Moss said yesterday, with how he's rebuilding community, it just makes so much sense. And I bet it's a whole lot, not only is it a whole lot better, I bet it's a whole lot easier than coming up into the situation with your own answers.
Absolutely. Well, wonderful. Tomorrow we're going to be doing this all again, but in a whole new way. So for everyone listening, I do want to invite you to join us tomorrow. We're going to be having our Climate and You Forum and our Restoration Forum. For the Climate and You Forum, it's the first time we're really going to get personal on climate. So you're going to hear how we can take care of ourselves and the planet at the same time. We talked a little bit about food today, and tomorrow we're going to dive into it deeper. We're going to talk about the interconnectivity between nature, food, and ourselves. We're going to hear the latest guidance on active transportation and what we can do about climate right in our own homes, including access to low-income energy assistance programs. In the Restoration Forum, you're going to hear from a diversity of leaders who are going to help us deepen our understanding of how to not only restore nature, but our communities. And no matter if we live in a big city or a small community, the suburbs, a rural community, or somewhere in between. And we hope you'll hear inspiring stories of climate restoration and resilience from communities across the nation. People will be talking about restoring our lands, our oceans, and rivers, and certainly how you can get involved. And finally, you will also have the opportunity to connect with each other at a socializing event at the end of the day. So we look forward to seeing you not only tomorrow, but at the end of the day in the social hour.
Yep, I'll be able to have my first glass of wine in 3 days, and all of us on the East Coast will be able to party at the end of the day tomorrow. But so again, thank you everybody for participating in this and joining and supporting us. And it's fun supporting you. It's just fun working aligned with so many organizations and so many people that are trying to push this rock over the peak. And I really hope that, in the next few years, we're going to go say we passed that tipping point of success, not the tipping points of failure. So,
absolutely. Beat that countdown clock, right? Absolutely. Okay, we'll see everyone tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, and look forward to engaging with you on chat and social. Have a good evening.